Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Sayfie here with Anthony Broome. Chris Ballas is out today. We'll have him back next week. He is on vacation. I believe he was up in Porcupine Mountain, wherever that is, somewhere in northern Michigan. So I hope he's enjoying that. It is Thursday, August 1st, and we have some football to talk about. Michigan started fall camp on Wednesday, and, it's kind of funny. I guess we'll talk about I'll tell a little story in a second, but we want to get you into the show by reminding you to head to the Wolverine.com for all of your Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting coverage. Now is the perfect time to get in. We got fall camp right now. We'll have intel from that. We will have the season coming up on August 31st with the opener. So you can get in right now 2 months for just $1 using the promo code UM1. That gets you on our message board. It gets you behind the paywall on all of our premium articles. Again, promo code UM1. That's UM in the digit 1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Also want to remind everybody to go to the WolverineOnDemand.com. You can order your copy of the 2024 Michigan Football Preview magazine, which I'm holding up right now if you're watching on YouTube. 160 pages, jam-packed information, features, columns, previews on every position, season predictions, class reviews, Big Ten preview, opponent previews, anything you could think of surrounding Michigan football heading into 2024 at your fingertips, thewolverineondemand.com. Still a lot of summer left to read that. But Anthony, let's get into it here. I'll tell my story of I actually was our new edition of the magazine that just came out. I was sent those. I was able to head down to the basketball building, was dropping some off, and in the distance there across the parking lot, I hear music blaring at about 9 in the morning on Wednesday. I'm thinking, man, football team's practicing already. We knew they moved up practices. They used to be an afternoon practice team under Jim Harbaugh. At least for fall camp, they're going mornings under Sharon Moore, and sure enough, they're out there. Guys moving around. You can't see much behind the fences there. Didn't want to risk anything by going up on the bridge there and trying to get some intel at all. But it just felt good to hear football. You could hear some whistles blowing. It felt good to hear the music. And by the way, music is going to be more prevalent at Michigan practices under Sharon Moore. Anthony, football is here.
Well, they call you Sayfie Claus in Ann Arbor because once a month or so, you go to each kind of building with your giant bag of the Wolverine magazine, some football previews, of course. Yeah, you're a popular man around those parts.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, music blaring from the football facility, and it wasn't Gordon Lightfoot or something like that. So
no, it was. I'm just kidding. It was.
So it's like for these guys, first day of school. I know they've been doing 7-on-7 stuff, and they've had workouts, and they have player-led stuff, but back to structure now. And we heard the coaching staff say, as you mentioned earlier, like they are gonna focus on stuff a little earlier in the day, just because they have the license to do so right now, the license and the ability to do so. Throwing it back to Jim.
Both of those things. Yep.
So, yeah, a lot of stuff to figure out. Wednesday morning did a piece on the position battles that we expect will play out. There's a lot of spots and snaps up for grabs. So it's just nice for them to be back in the thick of things. And sooner rather than later, as more of these data points come in, it's not speculation. It's not projection. We will put depth charts and stuff together based on what we're hearing, what coaches are saying, what players are saying. It's excited to see that stuff play out. Last year's camp was kind of ho-hum because it was a singular mission, a happy mission as they call it. And part of it too is that we just knew what they had. We don't know what they have in a lot of spots. So it takes on a little more exciting of a tone this time around, and excited to cover it.
If you're excited about fall camp, hit the like button on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel as well. That would be very, very helpful, because if you're excited, chances are other Michigan fans are excited. They're going to want to get the Michigan content here on our channel. We're closing in on 30,000 subscribers to the YouTube channel. the leader in the market right now. So help us continue that lead. Before we get into our football takeaways, let's talk to you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Anthony, you're wearing a Home Field shirt right now. I have the same exact one. It's a 1997 Michigan Rose Bowl champs, national championship shirt, Victor's Valiant. They got that. They got so much more. They have national championship gear from Michigan's 2023 Natty over at Home Field Apparel. They are my favorite brand to wear. Wear them because it's comfortable. I wear it because it's stylish. They got all the different schools that you could imagine. And they are launching their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 month-long campaign, and they will get you ready for college football season. They have football boxes, coaches jackets, bomber jackets, Champs Week. They're adding 5 schools to the Home Field roster. So, yeah, if you're an Ohio State fan, Michigan State fan listening in, go ahead, order some Home Field apparel right now. You can use the promo code Wolverine for 15% off your purchase. But back to these boxes, they have never before seen items for your school that are not available anywhere else. You can order a platinum VIP box that you will get a new hat or a ringer, a VIP koozie. The Platinum Pass guarantees you 20% off and early access to your school's football releases throughout the season. So that is available on August 9th at 10 Eastern time. It's highly limited. These will sell out, so make sure to get that in. Of course, more information over at homefieldapparel.com. Super easy to shop. The site is awesome. You can see it on the screen right now if you're watching on the YouTube version. Make sure to get geared up for the football season. You don't want to show up to the tailgate or the game or the watch party on August 31st when Michigan takes on Fresno State without your Michigan gear from Home Field, without your Natty gear to piss off your Michigan State and Ohio State friends. So make sure to go to homefieldapparel.com. You can use the promo code Wolverine for 15% off your purchase. That's at homefieldapparel.com, homefieldapparel.com. So, yeah, thank you to Home Field. Anthony's looking comfortable in his gear right now. Once my laundry cycle goes through, you get it back in the rotation, I'll be wearing basically that same shirt. So love Home Field Apparel. Anthony, let's talk Michigan defense in our takeaways from Wink Martindale's press conference. First, I can't help but mention the swag that Wink Martindale has. He's got the manual cutoff sweatshirts now. Like, he's cutting them off unless he's got a cutoff guy. He might have a meme guy for his Twitter account. He said he pleaded the fifth on that one, but he's got the white shirt underneath. He comes out with the shorts. He's got the sunglasses on inside, or at least on his hat inside. But he exudes a lot of confidence, and I wanted to start with that. He kind of fired back at some perceived critics of his defense and his style of play calling and what he's going to ask these Michigan players to do this season. And it was really a number of questions. And the first one was somebody asking about how the players are going to adjust to playing more man coverage, because this was a predominantly zone team last season. He said there's no truth to any of that. It's all speculation. And went on to say, yeah, we're going to ask them to play man. We're going to be teaching man principles, because man teams can play zone to win a game. Zone teams aren't as good at playing man to win a game. He said pressure teams can sit back and play coverage to win a game if they need to. The teams that don't usually pressure and aren't creative in that way can't necessarily just start doing that if they need to win a game. So basically they're going to have everything at their disposal. Now, the second thing is the narrative that he blitzes too much. And that is a narrative. And he says this, quote, "We'll control the narrative of it. Am I an aggressive play caller? Yes, I'm an aggressive play caller. We've won a lot of football games calling games aggressively, okay? When it doesn't work, that's when everybody says he's blitzing too much. You don't hear about it when you win. You hear about how creative you are. You don't listen to any of that. We'll find the right mix of pressure, simulated pressures, all that stuff. We'll find the right mix, and that's what training camp is for." He also was asked about his comments in the past, saying, "Hey, I'm the comparisons to Don Brown don't make any sense." He says, quote, "Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous as I see it. It's ridiculous. You have defenses that have ranked number 1 in the NFL, top 5 3 years in a row, And then you come into a new system in New York, you go to the playoffs, but what do they want to talk about? They want to talk about last year. It's just the way life is. It's where we're at in today's society, and that's fine with me. I know where I stand, and I stand where I'm excited about starting training camp, finding out who we're going to be, because it's all up to us. So, you know, he was fired up on a couple questions. The rest of it was not that intense. Like, he was lighthearted. We talked about some of the guys that are going to be, main players on his defense, how he loves the defensive line. But I thought those stood out right away is that, he understands, I guess, maybe what the narratives are that are out there. But as he said, they'll control that narrative as they go along. And I tend to side with him that he's kind of not getting a fair shake here. And I don't know who exactly are the people pushing these narratives. It's just kind of out there, and maybe a little bit of concern from Michigan fans. But flexibility and, really is a huge word in this defense. It's what he's talked about in the past, that John Harbaugh at the Ravens, went to him and said, hey, we need more flexibility with what we can do defensively. That's going to mean you're blitzing sometimes. It's also going to mean you're sitting back in coverage sometimes. It's going to mean you're in zone sometimes. It's going to mean you're playing man-to-man at other times. So to me, it's like we'll see what this defense is, as he said, when the season comes, and these narratives are kind of, probably overblown.
Yeah, poor Don Brown keeps catching strays because people think that just running man defense means that all of a sudden you're just going to run engage 8 every single play. And it's just going to be what it was circa 2018, 2019, 2020. He's not very happy about that comparison. And I don't know if he knows. It's not a slight against Don Brown. But yeah, you could tell he's heard it and he's not crazy about it. Again, he's sort of, and he said it himself, he in a lot of ways, he's the OG of the defense that they've run the last few years. And yes, he calls it a little more aggressively. Yes, he mixes in a little more man coverage, but this from the start, I mean, this idea that he was going to be too aggressive and it gave people flashbacks to Don Brown. Like, one of the biggest pitfalls of the Don Brown era is that they weren't able to zig when other teams would zag. And, there's still like a versatility, a multiplicity to what they want to do schematically and what they call out there. So, to me, and this guy's been in the NFL for 2 decades. It's just, there is something I like about Wink is there's a gravitas about him. And I think that within the context of, the dynamic of the staff, I think he more or less is the head coach of the defensive side of the ball, which all good defensive coordinators are. I think that's why Jesse Minter is probably going to be a head coach someday. It's why Mike McDonald is already a head coach, because when you coordinate, you're the head coach of your side of the football. And to have that guy, Wink Martindale, that is mixed with, a staff full of guys who have been defensive coordinators before. There's an exchange of ideas. There's going to be a pliability there. The sense I get too is it's not like there are going to be core things about what a Wink Martindale defense looks like that he is not going to move off from, and they are unapologetically going to do it. That's going to be blitzing. That's going to be running a little more man coverage, but they're not. I don't think it's going to be so rigid to where week to week. This is a guy who came from the NFL. I mean, you see different offenses each week. You play different quarterbacks with different talents each week in the NFL, and it's everything's just so much more advanced there, and you have to do what they do. I won't say quicker than college teams do, but this is a guy who is adept at adapting, because if you don't adapt in the NFL, you're going to flame out pretty quickly. So when you look at his, the success he's had at that level, you look at the fact that this defensive scheme isn't really going to change significantly. I mean, there are going to be changes to it. And then you look at the talent that they have. I mean, you can make the argument that at just about every position on the field, and in some spots 2 or 3 deep, you've got future pros out there. That's, to me, I mean, it's what we saw the last 2 years was so special that I could see there being a natural drop off to a certain extent, but this team is not, I don't see this defense regressing to what we watched in 2018, 2019, as teams in the Big Ten and nationally kind of started to figure out what Michigan was doing on that side of the ball. So You can tell there's a fire in his belly. It's kind of telling too that like an NFL guy could really just come in and be like, what we do is what we do. And I don't feel any pressure at all. You get the sense that there's a chip on his shoulder with what he's heard about the narrative and the reverse of, well, why did Baltimore pivot off of Wink Martindale for some of these younger guys that Michigan has had over the years? So to me, there's an edge to him and kind of a bit of a fire that I like and I think is needed over there because they have a lot to prove still.
And him even acknowledging that this is a potential narrative, and I don't think it's a huge thing. I think the majority of the Michigan fan base is fired up about Wink Martindale and very confident in what he's going to do. But even the fact that he's acknowledging that there's even this talk bubbling under the surface at all is a good sign if you're a Michigan fan actually concerned about that, because he completely disagrees with it. And he said this on a podcast back in June with Jake Butt, Champion Circles podcast. He said, there's a narrative now that some people are afraid it's going back to the old school Don Brown system. He said, that's not the case whatsoever. To me, that's profiling. Just because I'm old and Don Brown's old, you can't put us together. So, and he's funny too in his own way. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge concern, but I thought it was interesting to, that he did get into a little bit of that. You mentioned the potential drop off for this Michigan defense. He also understands that there's a high bar that's been set, and I think the players understand that as well by last year's defense, which finished number 1 in the country in scoring defense and total defense. He acknowledged that, yeah, things have to come together for that to happen. He said, yeah, we were number 1 defense in Baltimore. Obviously, the offense plays a part in that. The opponents play a part in that. It's not apples to apples when you compare Michigan's points per game allowed, to any other team in the country, but generally it's a good thing to be at the top, and I think that's what Michigan's aiming for. And here's Wink Martindale on that. He says, quote, I think you're not he was asked about the pressure, if he's feeling pressure to live up to that standard. He said, quote, I think you're not worth a grain of salt if you don't feel pressure as a coach every year, no matter where you're at. Do you want to be better than that? Sure you do, but sometimes it's not what you want is not always what you get. There are different opponents, different offenses, and everything fits right when you end up being number 1. I've been around number 1 defenses, and everything fits just right that season. But I think that there's no doubt where the bar is set. There's no doubt we've all set the bar, and that's for us to be the best in the country. I'm not going to hide from that. I'm not going to run from that, and neither are we as a defense. They have some questions to be answered at different positions. It has to come together. They have to have the leadership, the communication. All of that has to come together, but do you feel like this defense can be better than last year, the same, close to the same?
I think with what it looks like and with how talented they are, I think it's going to look mostly the same. Now, you're not playing cadavers for the first 2 months of the year. So maybe statistically is where most of the drop-off comes, but I think you can make the argument that they're better up front. I think you can make the argument that, another year of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, really it's your junior year as a lineman on either side of the ball where you see that biggest jump most of the time. Think back to Mozzie Smith, think back to Chris Hinton, and there's just much more to unlock there with the guys they have now. I think that Derek Moore can be more disruptive than, say, a Braden McGregor was. I think that Josiah Stewart can be a tone setter in a way that, maybe even Jalen Harrell wasn't. So I think you could make the argument defensive line better. Linebacker, it's tough because Junior Colson, Michael Barrett were so good, but Ernest Hausman, I think, plays faster. I think he's more athletic than Junior Colson was. And that doesn't mean better, but and DeShaun Barham is as great as Mike Barrett was. DeShaun Barham is kind of in that same sort of mold as Hausman in terms of athletic, probably more versatile, a guy who can put his hand in the dirt, drop back into coverage. Secondary, we'll see, just because of the safety stuff. Will Johnson's a constant back there, probably the best player on the team. So, I just think with, statistically, I think, yes, there will be a drop-off because you're playing Texas. The first 4 weeks of the season are Fresno State, Texas, Arkansas State, USC, whereas last year the first 4 weeks were what?
East Carolina,
UNLV,
Bowling Green,
and then Rutgers, I think it was.
Yep.
Like, there's just so much more statistically that they'll probably have to deal with. But yeah, I don't know about better. Is there a Mikey Sainris still on this defense? I don't know. I think they have a lot of guys in a lot of different spots that could be good. But yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop off. I think that there'll be a little more bend but don't break to this defense. But I think, from a talent perspective, from a effectiveness perspective, I think more often than not, these guys are going to get the job done. I don't have really any concerns about them.
Other than some health issues early on last season, like that team last year, that defense would have been perfectly equipped to handle this schedule that Michigan has. I think it's tough right out of the gate. You are healthier. I mean, Will Johnson wasn't healthy at the beginning of last season. He wasn't fully healthy the entire year. He still became a second-team All-American, which is pretty incredible and shows you what his ceiling is this year if he can stay healthy. He's always kind of had some bumps and bruises, but that's common of a lot of guys in this game. But I think that it's tougher with less depth this year than they're going to have. They're going to have to play guys, especially up front, for more snaps. They're not going to be as fresh, and we'll see how that impacts them, especially as the year goes on. When you start off with this good of a schedule with potentially tough offenses, I mean, you don't know what USC is going to be as a team, but you would think that offense is going to challenge them. Quinn Ewers comes in with the Texas offense, a good offensive line, I think a pretty good receiving core, despite the guys they lost, and Ewers being an established quarterback. They're going to test you. You would think that Washington tests you with Will Rogers at quarterback at the very least. So, look, I don't think it's going to be better either. I think the depth, it is interesting. Will this be a better defensive line? Maybe the starting lineup can be, but it's hard. I don't know that we'll ever see a D-line at Michigan that was that deep and, just consistently dominant no matter who was in there. And then, like you said, I think linebacker could be better. Secondary probably take a step back without Mikey Sainris still. But here's the thing. When you lose a guy like Mikey Sainris still or Aiden Hutchinson a few years ago, you just don't play the same way. Like, you don't do exactly what you did the year before. You play to your own strengths. So you can still be close to as good, better. We'll see.
Yeah.
Playing a different way, if that makes sense.
It does. And I want to, it's the best season in Michigan football history, so in so many ways, like the fact that there's a negative connotation to, there'll be a bit of a drop off. Like, historically speaking, there's going to be a bit of a drop off there. They're not as deep. I think the leadership, the poise in a few positions isn't going to be quite what it was, but they're going to be pretty darn good and a lot of fun to watch. And, it's just like they've when you achieve perfection, which is what they did on the field last year, the bar has been set. So against their own bar, they might fail to measure up, but compared to everyone else, I think they'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Wink Martindale didn't talk too much about position battles, guys stepping up, because he very much so is just looking to fall camp for, to find those answers for himself. He even said, Zeke Berry is the guy right now at nickelback that is standing out, but Jaden McBurrows is in the hunt. Other guys are in the hunt. He said it's a competition just like it is everywhere else. So nothing's set in stone, and probably more so the case in college than it is in the NFL. He understands that. And, he didn't really go there with a lot of guys. He did say, though, that Ike Iwuna had a heck of a summer and smashed the conditioning test after struggling with it in years past, from what he had heard. And they need depth to step up in not just the interior of the defensive line, but the entire defensive line. Ike Iwuna is a guy who hasn't played at all in his entire career, hasn't taken a snap in a game. But who knows? Maybe he factors into the rotation at the back end at some point this year. Rayshon Benny, we'll see how healthy he gets and quickly. And as Jerome Moore said, he'll have to work out the kinks. But I think that one of the more interesting things Wink Martindale said is basically it was response to my question about how important it is in this defense to have a strong D-line and guys that can get done the block destruction that they look for. He said, before you ask the next question about who the guys are that are going to step up, we're going to find out. And that's one of the big keys, I think, of fall camp for this Michigan defense is figuring out who they can trust and who they can't trust, right? Come game one. And then it can develop from there throughout the season. But in game one, who do we trust and who do we don't? They need to grow that number from the sounds of it. And I think they will. There are a lot of capable players there.
Yeah. And I think with a guy like Wink Martindale, really the benefit of just a brand new coaching staff is that for a guy like Ike Iwuna, like there's not that. I mean, they have practice film and stuff from last year, but there's not like a bias towards what he is or what they think he is. Like it could be a fresh start for not just guys like him, but guys in general. So when you hear, Wink Martindale come in and kind of talk a guy like that up, who he's never played a snap at Michigan. So that's eye-opening. Again, so much of the schedule last year came in with the benefit that Jesse Minter told us about this time last year. Like they wanted to get 22 to 27 guys ready on defense. I think that was the number. When you lose what they did, there's a lot of backfilling to do, and guys that might not have gotten opportunities before are going to be in the mix for playing time. There's spots at edge, edge 3 and 4. We assume TJ Guy will be one of those dudes, so to speak, but there's a lot to sort out there. Defensive tackle, again, just because, last year again came with the benefit that the starters got to rest a lot the first 2 months of the year. In order for them to be truly effective, I think you still want to be able to rotate bodies and make sure guys stay fresh, because if you have, Mason Graham in the fourth quarter against USC fresh and rested because that Trey Pierce can come in and give you 5 to 10 snaps or, an example like that, that's good for everyone. So to me, I can see this being like last year was sort of a laid back, let's make sure everyone stays healthy. Let's get our bodies and minds right for the long haul. I think this is going to be a really physical training camp. And I think that's a good thing when you have a lot of these young guys. When you're going to see, and again, I know they're 20.5-point favorites over Fresno State. Those live bullets are going to come a little faster than they did from East Carolina or from Colorado State or from Western Michigan, right? So I can see there being a sense of urgency there. And all right, you guys had all off season to get your bodies right. We're going to give you the time that you need in the evenings now here to get your minds right, your bodies right. We're getting after it. And I think that's exciting and will ultimately be pretty good for them.
Yeah, I remember in 2018 training camp, all the talk was about Notre Dame because that was the opener, and that helped motivate them throughout the offseason. And yeah, Texas isn't game one, so they're not really talking about Texas publicly. I think they probably are behind closed doors. And of course, they're going to prepare for them in training camp in some form or fashion. But the players know that Texas is game 2. The players know that Fresno State could put up a fight in game 1, so that helps motivate you throughout the camp. And yeah, going back to what you said about Jesse Minter and his comments last fall camp, he said, yeah, the year before we had 22 guys played in the first half of the first game. He said, we want that to be 26. If I recall correctly, they hit that mark or were close to it. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, that was a ridiculously deep team. This year, they're probably hoping to get to 22 if they can get that big of a lead on Fresno early on, which is no given, of course, given that Fresno State has a pretty good track record against the Big Ten. I think they're 4-10 against Big Ten opponents historically. So we shall see. Let's move over to the offensive side of the ball. Talk about Kirk Campbell, Michigan's OC and quarterbacks coach. He gives his press conference on Tuesday as well. And we have to start with this. How wide open is this quarterback battle? It's so wide open that how they determine who got the snaps in what order at quarterback on day one went from oldest to youngest, which is what they did in the spring as well. Of course, Jack Tuttle was out recovering with an injury at that point, so it was Davis Warren. But here's the order: Jack Tuttle, Davis Warren, Alex Orji, Jaden Denegal, and Jaden Davis. Don't know if they included walk-ons with that, but that's the order right now in terms of who got the reps. It's not the depth chart or anything. It sounds like it's pretty wide open there. They'll all get reps with the ones at some point. That also tells me how open this thing is, because you only have a finite amount of reps. You know, if you do have, and of course, more guys are going to get more first-team reps than others, but if you're actually going to give some first-team reps to guys that, you know, to 5 guys, then that tells me that you're still really searching and trying to figure out what this is going to look like.
Yeah, and that development, the oldest to youngest thing, again, I wrote about this yesterday. Like, it doesn't matter. Like ultimately, it's just a starting point for the first day. They could have determined that by playing rock, paper, scissors. They could have determined that by going in alphabetical order. There's any number of ways to do that. And which is, this next part has been kind of a common theme of this week in terms of different narratives, but you know, rival fan bases take that as low-hanging fruit and twist it and distort it. And oh, they don't, you know, they're so unsure that they're just going with the oldest guy in the room, which ultimately, like, that might happen because Jack Tuttle could win this job. But, you know, you start somewhere, and then the data points that you get from the battle will determine who gets what. And I don't think that that's controversial. Now, it's a little bit different from quarterback battles that Michigan's had in the past, in that we've never seen one that has, it's really 3 contenders. But when you say that all 5 guys are going to get reps with the ones, I mean, it's technically open to all 5. We think it'll be focused on Davis Warren, Alex Orji, Jack Tuttle in no particular order, with most likely Tuttle and Orji being who it comes down to in that last week of camp. But the other thing Kirk Campbell says, they're going to take time with it. They're going to, this could go, you know, you want to have a starter by that first game, of course. But just remember this, like, with where we're at now, you know, everyone wants answers to questions as soon as they can possibly get them. I would just say this, and I wrote this as well. You know, 2 weeks into fall camp in the 2022 season, Cade McNamara is probably locked in as your starter. It goes into a 3rd week. JJ starts to surge to a point where, whether it was completely genuine or not, maybe they were just waiting for McCarthy, the light to just come on for McCarthy to make this move and kind of ease Cade McNamara out. Light comes on late in camp for JJ McCarthy, and boom, he winds up grabbing the job after 2 weeks. Now, is it possible a battle could go into that opening game? Sure. But you got to let these guys let it play out. You have to let, now again, by the end of this week, really, it's going to be next week where we see guys starting to separate, because this week they're just in, I believe they're just in, you know, helmets, shorts, what have you, maybe shells later on this week. Full pads, I assume, at some point early next week go on. And once that happens, then you have guys start to fade away, or you have guys that start to separate. So if you're looking for 2 weeks from now for us to come on here and say, yeah, I mean, it's this guy without question who starts the opener, I don't know that we'll be there yet. But I think by the end of next week, you want to probably get it down to who those 3 guys might be. Maybe 2 guys stand out. Maybe 1 guy stands out above all of them. But I think what's pretty clear at this point is that, you know, we're not, pardon my French, we're not bullshitting you when we say we don't know who the starter is going to be. Like, Michigan doesn't know who the starter is going to be yet. And we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. It's scary. The unknown can be fun, but it's kind of scary when it comes to the most consequential position in the sport. But that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, the unknown was a little more exciting 2 years ago when one of the guys in contention was behind center for a Big Ten championship the year before. The other guy was behind center on a part-time basis for that same championship team, and, you know, also had shown a lot of upside and had been talked up behind the scenes. And of course, JJ McCarthy goes on to win Michigan 2 more Big Ten titles and a national championship, become a top 10 pick. We didn't know all that was going to happen at the time, or any of it, right? No man knows the future, but man, it was a little bit more exciting, I think. And that's why Michigan fans are a little bit angsty about this, but it's the situation they're in right now. And they seem confident about what this offense can be. And that's my next point, is Kirk Campbell also had confidence about his unit. He was asked, what gives you that confidence that this team can put up 30 to 35 points per game again? And this is his quote. We have a lot of guys coming back who have had a lot of playing time. I just hit on Tyler Morris. If you don't consider him a starter from last year, you better consider Samaj Morgan a starter. If we were in 11 personnel, they were playing in it. If we put a fullback in the game, Max Bredesen started. Then we add Josh Preeb. Yeah, he didn't start here, but he started at Northwestern. Miles Hinton started the season. We have a lot of guys with experience, so that gives you a lot of confidence there. The players we have in this room are so explosive and dynamic. We talk about Colston Loveland, his ability to be explosive, and the other guys I hit on. Excited about who steps up as the explosive outside receiver. We've got a lot of talent in the receiver room, the tight end room, the running back room with Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards. I couldn't be any more confident in the ability of those guys. And Kirk Campbell is like a lot of coaches where he's not going to sit here and be like, yeah, we got some big question marks here and big concerns there. But I also don't know that he would, go that deep on his confidence in this unit if he didn't have that. And he has a good point. I mean, there are a lot of players here that have played a lot of football despite not being starters. Now, as Tony Alford said on the In the Trenches podcast this week, yeah, Donovan Edwards is back. Kalel Mullings is there, but they've never been in the role of a featured back before. Donovan Edwards has for 3 games, against Ohio State, Purdue, and TCU in 2022. But on a full-time basis, that hasn't been the case. Kalel Mullings has 50 career carries. So Kirk Campbell has a great point. There's also another level, though, to what those contributions are. You're out there on the field every play now, Samaj Morgan. You're out there on the field every play now, Tyler Morris. Miles Hinton, you have to be not just a starter, but a very good one for Michigan for potentially 17 games and stay healthy. Those are still things that, the next step that some of these guys need to take. And not that they can't take it, because a lot of them haven't had the opportunity to. Like Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum's been there the whole time. So it's not a knock on him, but it's just part of, and he sees these guys more than we do, right? But from the outside looking in, you just have to acknowledge that some of these guys are a little more unproven.
Yeah, and that's where, Kirk Campbell also makes the point of the run game in particular is going to look different, but we're going to still do similar things. Like when Blake Corum moves on from Michigan, yes, that means Donovan Edwards is naturally getting more carries, probably the lion's share of the carries, but we'll see. But that doesn't just mean that Donovan Edwards has to become the battering ram that Blake Corum was. That's where while it benefits Edwards from a volume perspective, the guy who benefits the most from it is Kalel Mullings, because he's going to be the guy that's out there in short yardage. He's going to be kind of the battering ram on the goal line and in those, those third down situations, or second and shorts, third and shorts. So, again, it's the whole, if you just distilled this entire coaching change, this team, a lot of the personnel stuff, if you distilled it down to its most basic form in one phrase, it's similar but different. So to me, this is I think when you look at the backfield in particular, like this to me is going to be a lot more of a timeshare than some people would maybe hope for. Everyone wants Donovan Edwards to be that 25 carry a game guy. That'd be great if he can hold up and handle that, and he runs a little tougher through contact. I think that can happen for him. But they have what they need in a lot of spots. I think they have it at running back. I think they have it at wide receiver. I think Tyler Morris, assuming he stays healthy, can be what Ronnie Bell was, can be what Roman Wilson was. Fred Moore, Samaj Morgan, those guys can be weapons as well, like some of the depth pieces they have. It's, we like what they have at tight end, obviously. Have the best tight end in college football. Offensive line comes with its share of question marks. Again, Miles Hinton, we talked about him a lot. Greg Crippen is a guy that Michigan has liked, but, sort of, I won't say recruited over him, but last 2 years, transfer guys that wind up being All-Americans, nationally recognized, things like that. So that all of these guys are getting this opportunity, like it's massive. It's huge for them. And there's just so much that's unknown about what you're backfilling and who can hold up for X amount of games, who can bring it every single week. So yeah, it's despite thinking that they have what they need, we'll see about quarterback, but from an infrastructure perspective, it seems like they have what they need, but it's going to be pretty telling because these guys are going to get tested right off the bat. There is no lead in to, the first difficult game or, the last few years, really the first test has been the first road trip that they've gone on in week 5 this week or this year. First road trip's not till week 6. and you've already played Texas and USC and Minnesota. Fresno State will be, not exactly a cakewalk either. So yeah, these guys, there's, again, it just adds to what I think there'll be a sense of urgency in camp. Like it's a lot of new for a lot of people, but no one's getting their hand held going into any of this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it is going to come down to the quarterback, as you said, so it's like you have the rest of these pieces, they have to be good too, and they'll help whoever the quarterback is, but that guy's going to have to make some big plays in big moments for Michigan to have an offense that can stay on the field and score points. And you mentioned Greg Crippen, being a good example of this, where they talk about, hey, we're going to bring in transfers if we feel like that they fit our culture and if they're talented enough, and that's going to add competition, right? And if you could think of it one way, where it's like if you're Greg Crippen, who's seen Olu Oluwatimi and Drake Nugent come in back-to-back years and start over him at center, then you could think of it as kind of a negative, but they added competition. Greg Crippen had to compete with those guys. He got to learn from those guys, and now that's where that competition pays off. Now, what they're trying to do on the offensive line, which is my last point from Kirk Campbell's press conference, is build some of the depth. Who's the next Greg Crippen now that Greg Crippen is likely going to start, right? I mean, Raheem Anderson obviously in the mix there, but you understand my point. Kirk Campbell says they have about 7 guys right now on the offensive line that are capable of going in, that they trust. He wants to find at least one more, and that's a task for them in fall camp. So here's the 7, that I believe that it is, right? He didn't list them, but Greg Crippen and Raheem Anderson at center, Giovanni El-Hadi, Josh Preeb at guard, Miles Hinton, Jeff Percy, and Andrew Gentry at tackle. I think they, really realistically, he said last year they were 9 deep. He said they want to get to 8 or 9 this year, so at least one to step up. And I think the candidates to do that are Nathan Afobe and Dominic Jadis at guard, and then Evan Link at tackle. Those would be the most likely, at least in my opinion. And then also Raheem Anderson, I would believe, can also play guard. So if you do need someone to step up on the interior, I think he would be the guy. But yeah, they're searching for a guy or two at offensive line, to step up. And I think that's needed. It's not as deep or talented as last year, but if they can get a guy or two to emerge, then I think you have some of the depth you need, knowing that it's a long season and things could change at any time.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head just by virtue of the 7 that you named right off the bat, because those are the 7 that we heard about last week at Big Ten Media Days. So, again, 8, 9 is the number. I think all of the guys you listed off make sense. I wonder if any of we'll see if any of the freshmen, like early enrollees, I believe was Blake Frazier among the guys that were here.
Yes.
It's hard for them to get on the field early, but we'll see if someone steps up into the role again. Got a month. That's a lot of time to figure it out too. And guys it's going to be a roller coaster for some guys. Other guys will just kind of come out of the gate. Other guys might bloom late in camp. So important to know, I think they want to get that initial 7 to 8 locked in. We know they'll probably do stuff with some extra blockers out there. So going to want to have, an extra guy ready at least for that. So it's important. So much of this camp is getting guys up to speed that will start. And so much of it is kind of yanking the next in line into being what some of these guys are this year. So we'll see, but it's going to be a lot of fun to track.
Will Raheem Anderson start a game this year? Would you bet on that?
Sorry for the dramatic pause.
I love it.
No. That's it.
Okay.
No. Only because, and I say that only because, and I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to be proven wrong, because if he's not a projected starter, that means someone got hurt somewhere. But it seems like with Raheem, we've gone through these seasons where you hear about how great he was in camp or how great he's been in practice, and then the name just completely flies off the radar. So I'd love to see it. I mean, it feels like he's been around forever, and he's been a guy that they've wanted to get in there. Yeah, if they hadn't brought in Josh Preeb, I think he's probably one of those starting 5, and he still could be if he beats out Crippen. But I don't know. I think Cripp's going to be pretty good, to be honest with you.
I think so too. I was just thinking the probability, like I would bet on over a half a game just because of an injury here, injury there. We've seen that throughout the years, and it's pretty frequent on the offensive line, and that he's supposedly in the mix to start at center. I would take him. Yeah. I would take over half a game.
Can I rephrase the question and serve it back to you?
Yes.
Who's the first offensive lineman off the bench?
Well, I think it depends on the spot. I think it's Raheem Anderson if it's somebody on the interior that goes down, and I think it's Jeff Percy at either tackle.
Let me rephrase and serve it back to myself. If they do, podcast. I know. If they do the Trente Jones thing, the extra blocker as a tight end or the eligible, whatever it is, who is that guy?
That's a really good question.
I think that's an underrated question to answer too.
So
not for us.
It was Trente Jones last year until he came into the starting lineup after Zach Zinter's injury. Then you saw some 6 and 7 offensive lineman sets. Miles Hinton came in. Giovanni El-Hadi was in. He was in on Blake Corum's final touchdown, to kind of put the nail in the coffin against Washington. So it's a great question. Could it be Dom Jadis? Could it be Nate Afobe? Evan Link, I think, is definitely a contender for that, right? We'll see. And they're going to use those sets. Sharon Moore was doing that as an OC. He becomes a head coach. I know it's Kirk Campbell's offense now, but if you think that they're not going to run 6, 7 offensive linemen at a time sometimes, you're crazy now that Sharon Moore's a head coach. They're definitely going to do that, and they should because it's part of their identity, and it worked last season. It was one of the big reasons why they beat Penn State because they went to some of those heavier sets. But
can I add a candidate?
I see you were looking something up there. Yeah.
Extra blocker. Let me just read something from On3. This particular player's profile. It says, developmental offensive line prospect with an encouraging athletic profile and movement skills. Checks in with a 6'9" wingspan and a 9.75-inch hand, and worked at right tackle for his high school as a junior after playing tight end as a sophomore. I present to you.
No, can I guess?
Frazier.
I was going to guess.
Was that what you were going to guess?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say probably Blake Frazier or Andrew Sprague, but that makes sense. I think Blake Frazier could be. Do you want to play him in more than 4 games, though, if he's not a key guy?
If you're looking for 8 or 9 guys and he's in that mix and you could find a role for him because the eligible tackle is a role in the Michigan offense, assuming that they keep what they've been doing. I just wonder. I'm just having fun with it, but I think that would be something to maybe keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Especially since he was an early enrollee.
No, I like that. I think he started for one of the teams in the spring game or came in pretty early in the game. Obviously doesn't mean a ton. They didn't play the starters that much, but he's definitely a candidate to jump into that mix, right? Into the depth that they're looking for. It's wide open, right? As you said earlier, these guys have the license and the ability to do that. Let's move on real quick to basketball. We have Big Ten tournament sites for the future that are out. We knew this last week due to some intel that the Big Ten tournament for next year will be in Indianapolis. That's the 2025 season, the upcoming season. Then Chicago in 2026, Indianapolis in 2027, and then Las Vegas in 2028. The women, a little bit different. So, yeah, we'll be making our way out to Vegas. I've never been. Maybe I'll be there before 28. Don't know if I'll ever come back if I do go before then. But the women are 2025 in Indy, just like the men. 2026 in Indy. They will go to Las Vegas in 27. And then a really fun one, Detroit in 2028. I'd love to see Detroit get in the mix for the men. And we'll see. Maybe that'll be in the next 4 years, and they're trying to make a run at it. But your thoughts on Vegas entering the mix here as the Big Ten goes coast to coast?
Not surprised. I think that's something that we, as soon as these 4 teams from the West, or at least the initial 2 teams that joined from the Pac-12, I think that was one of our immediate takeaways. It's like, well, the Big Ten tournament's just going to be in Vegas. Like, they're going to do that at some point. Indy, that is our home away from home at this point. So now confirmed, we'll be back there this spring, which I'm looking forward to. The last time I was there for the Big Ten tournament, last time I think Michigan was there for the Big Ten tournament, was that infamous blown lead against Indiana where Devontae Jones just kind of flopped around like a fish, kept falling down.
Hurt, but yeah, they crumbled and he physically crumbled. Like he was just falling down constantly.
So yeah, I have no problems with Indy for the purposes of what we do. Great setup. Chicago, I'm excited for. They usually do a pretty good job with that. And I think someone can quote me on this. I think I just saw they're doing some renovations to United Center or around that area. So if that's the case, we'll be looking forward to seeing that. And I've been to T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. I saw a Vegas Golden Knights game, I think 2 years ago. I was in Vegas for about 36 hours, maybe even less than that, maybe like 28 hours. And it's a lot of fun. Didn't get the opportunity to get into too much more than that, but yeah, it'll be fun. We'd love to see it come to Detroit. Obviously, that would do wonders for the Wolverines' travel budget to just kind of take an Uber downtown or drive downtown and take in as much basketball as we can possibly handle. But it'll be fun. If it comes there at some point, we'll see. I assume it will, but interested in seeing what those next 4 years look like after that, because we could go to LA. We could go to, I wouldn't be surprised if it was in Seattle at some point. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then we have to end with a guy we talked about a week ago coming out of Big Ten Media Days, DeShaun Foster, the new head coach at UCLA. We said, or at least I said, he bombed at his opening statement, saying, I guess he didn't know he was going to have to give much of an opening statement. He thought they were going to go right to questions. He said, yeah, we're from UCLA. We're in LA with USC. And then he kind of paused. Obviously, it was getting dragged all over social media. Had a press conference this week and was wearing his new shirt, Nike. It's got the California a little silhouette there, and it says, "We're in LA." He's embracing the mishap. He's embracing kind of an embarrassing moment for him. Got to give him his props for that. We dragged him last week. I got to give him credit this week. I like it. And, he's probably a great guy and obviously a good coach.
That's outstanding. And kind of a cool, kind of a cool slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. And that was, again, anyone who's ever been in a spot where you're in front of a microphone, we do it frequently. Something comes up that you weren't expecting. You kind of have to, let's just say I've been there. And at some point on this podcast, I was probably there. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice to see them embrace that. Brings that whole little story full circle.
I messed up an ad read earlier in the show. We had to redo it. So that tells you everything you need to know. I can't be throwing stones. That is going to be our show for today. Send you into the weekend. We'll have more fall camp intel coverage, all that over at the Wolverine.com, not only throughout the rest of the week, but the weekend, the following week, the rest of the month, into the season. You can get in on the action over at the Wolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. So the best deal in America. Might as well take advantage while it lasts right now. Like the video if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see everyone next time.